Hey everyone, Rob here from the developer relations team at Bitrise. I am joined by Tadas, Petra, the man, the myth, the legend, the Google developer expert and developer advocate for Agora. How's it going?
It's going well. Just finished watching like 4 or 5 hours of the Google I/O, so my eyes are a little watery, but overall I'm doing great.
Yeah, and that's the point really of this video. Really, is that I brought in the big guns to help me do a recap or kind of just a general summary over the 4 or 5 hours that we've gotten to experience today for the first day of Google I/O, which is really cool because it was actually kind of a mixed session. Last year was completely virtual, but this year they actually had it. They had it in Mountain View, but I think it was really mostly open just to Google employees and partners. So there's no chance we're getting tickets. We're actually both based in Chicago. We were unseasonably warm, but we got to spend all day inside watching these sessions. So that's really cool. Well, thanks for joining me today, and we're trying to make this recap, as concise and as quick as possible. I did actually take some notes. I kind of cheated. We were talking before we jumped on this, is that I took a couple of notes just because there were so many really cool things that were announced today, as always with Google I/O. And I want to make sure that I hit those high points and do those things some justice, especially some of the really cool announcements are made. So let's go ahead, I guess, and get into it. I mean, this first day is a whirlwind, right? Because it starts with a main keynote where they get into kind of higher level services, some of the really cool, innovative stuff that they're doing from really general holistic level. They got a little bit into Android, and of course, they always bring in the hardware stuff. And then after that, there was a developer keynote. And then once the developer keynote finished, that's really when the floodgates open, right? Is that, they unleashed all of these, pre-recorded or on-demand sessions. And as we were talking about before this, is that, we kind of got into a little bit of them, but there's just so many more, which is the good thing because we're going to be doing a couple of these recaps we're going to do today, and then we're going to do one tomorrow as well. But I guess we can first kind of dive into the main keynote.
So though they do have all these sessions for the Flutter and like Android and all those separate sessions, but the highlights of each one is covered within the developer keynote. So if you don't want to have to watch, because I think each one's like an hour, and there's I think I set up to like 150 things you can watch there. So the developer keynote covered the highlights, and the main keynote, they kind of covered a lot of software related stuff that went into releasing some pretty cool hardware that we're going to get to hopefully see. And then the developer keynote went like a little deeper into the actual services that they have in Google.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because exactly right too. It seemed like it kind of like drills down deeper as you get into it. So you had the main keynote and then that developer keynote, which hits all the highlights. And then even whenever you get into some of the sessions, like what's new in Android, what's new in Flutter, it seemed like some of those, they dive a little bit deeper into it, but they're also setting up some of the other courses. Like, they'll mention, if you want to dive deeper into Jetpack, or if you want to dive deeper into material or something like that, here are some other sessions that you can get into. And so I think this is good because we're going to kind of hit those high points from both of the keynotes. Maybe, give a little preview into the sessions that, we want to dive into for tomorrow. And then kind of go from there. So yeah, I guess with the first one, I don't know how you felt about it, but I feel like this trend of artificial intelligence and machine learning is really big. I mean, this isn't really just a Google I/O thing. I mean, I think that they're in the forefront, obviously, because they're really innovating in that space. But it seemed like they hit pretty heavy on that in the first. Is that you say your take is as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Google seems to be the most AI and machine learning heavy company out there. I mean, maybe Facebook's kind of working towards that a little bit more, but last year they all, more than half their announcements were machine learning based. This year, same thing. They are adding it into, it seems like every little thing that they do, like their Google Docs, Google Sheets, they can provide like summaries there. That was the one thing that I saw pretty cool.
That was awesome. Yeah.
And I don't know if I would necessarily use that, because I kind of feel bad. Like, imagine someone typing out a whole Google Doc for you to read through, and you just read the summary, and then I feel bad. But like the thing they announced with it was potentially like summaries of conversations within messages. I think that one could be super useful. So like, let's say you have a group chat with like 100 people talking, you kind of get lost sometimes, and a quick summary of what happened, I think that'd be like very useful in this day and age.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think that whole, it's like conversational AI, right? That conversational artificial intelligence, I think is really cool because I think that can help in a variety. I mean, you think of all the applications. I mean, as developers kind of getting in, I mean, that's one side of it. But you think about like the implications for sales and for marketing, and those kind of closer to the business side, having to deal with, bunches of chats and even the documents. I mean, they kind of describe that as the TLDR, and I kind of side with you, is that you're basically taking somebody's work, maybe the past couple of days or hours, and you're basically saying it's just too long, didn't read. I did think that was pretty interesting. And I mean, I thought that they kind of, the other thing I was going to say as I was looking at that is that from an AI standpoint, I actually made a joke about it on Twitter, is that they have this thing called chain of thought prompting. I don't know if you saw that, but where they basically, like when you're taking a math test, and it asks for you to solve it, and I've done this in the past, is that you solve the problem or something, or maybe you just guess or you get the right answer at the end of it, but there's always this portion that's basically like, show your work, like prove to me that you knew exactly what you were doing. And this whole chain of thought prompting really reminded me of that, because it not only tells you the answer to a question that you'll ask, like I think the example that they use is how many hours are in the month of May, and it provided that, right? It was pretty general, pretty generic, and it provided how many hours. But then this chain of thought processing basically dove into exactly how it calculated that. And so I'm pretty interested. They gave a pretty vague description of what it is, but I'm interested in, the implications of something like that and what other, usages it might be able to, have or something. But
I think it makes sense. Like, it's pretty cool for things like that. But I was trying to think of like other examples where that would be useful, and like how those would go up, like what the chain of thought process is that a machine learning or AI algorithm like uses for all that stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting because like math is an easy application for something like that, right? Because you kind of got to break it in, you got to do it. But it's like, where else could you? It'll be interesting to see, or pretty fascinating to see what people can do with that. Because I'm betting there's some pretty creative people out there that have already like started to kind of turn the wheels and kind of figure out what they want to do with some of the stuff. But yeah, and obviously this is a little bit more mobile focused. I am really intrigued by there was some Google Assistant updates. And I think, if this had some kind of API behind it to be able to do this too, but they have that whole, I think it was called look and talk, where they're taking out the necessity of using a keyword prompt, right? So you're not having to say, hey, whatever, like start up and answer whatever question I have. It was basically based on making eye contact with your device and then, voice recognition, the combination of those two. That's fascinating to me, because that's really starting to, we talked about the conversational AI before. This is interesting because it's like almost very science fiction like, where you're starting to bridge that gap a little bit in artificial intelligence and make it much more of a casual kind of approach or conversation. How did you take that? I thought that was really cool.
My view on that is kind of more of like a usability view. I think that one might not be too usable. I was more intrigued with the second part. There was two ways that they added the Google Assistant. First one was, you look at it. The second one was the quick phrases, I think they called it, where some of the phrases you don't have to say, hey Google or whatever. You just say what you want and it just knows to listen to that phrase. The reason I don't think the usability is too good on the looking at it, because I mean, I guess I don't know how other people use their Google Assistant, but I'm usually yelling like from 4 rooms across, like, hey, turn off my music. I think like 99% of the time, I'm not like looking directly at it, but it is a very cool technology. And like, I mean, for certain scenarios, like it definitely makes sense.
I just got this image in my mind of you like quickly walking across the room to just like look at it and tell it to do something. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, when you put it in like real world context, it probably doesn't have a ton of application for some of that. So yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, it makes sense. Like, let's say you're cooking, right? And you need to look up a recipe, like you're right there. You're going to be looking at the screen anyways for it. Then it makes like 100% sense. sense.
That's
but
true.
like,
Especially maybe your hands are full or
yeah,
something, or you're just kind of like looking over. I don't know, like
yeah.
can't really move the the device or something like that and be able to use it. But yeah, that's fascinating though. I mean, it is kind of a cool. They kind of jumped all over the place with some of the announcements. I mean, which is pretty typical. And then they got into some of the augmented reality, which I know is something that they also get into a little bit more in the developer keynote. But this whole idea of being able to combine, both augmented reality, and then it seems like they're focusing pretty heavily on like things like geospatial. I don't know what you thought about that, but I could see a lot of implications in the mobile world for being able to, especially augmented reality and use of the camera, combined with being able to track geolocation or applications where maybe you could check out other geolocations or something like that. I don't know. What do you think about that? I thought that the augmented reality stuff was pretty cool.
So I'm not too deep into augmented reality, and I didn't really even fully understand what that geospatial meant. But I'm thinking that's the layout of the world, right? And
Yeah.
all that type of stuff. Yeah, that's what I got out of it. I mean, it seems super like interesting and something I want to explore. It seems like that's the way technology is going, right? And having tools like that will be, I mean, critical in order to build AR related stuff. The one thing that I don't know if this technically counts as AR, but probably my favorite part of this whole developer keynote was the glasses at the end.
Oh,
So
yeah, I love that. Yeah,
that's,
awesome.
I don't think that's technically AR. I think that's just like a little piece of text like within the glass. But they announced how they have a glass that you can wear that you'll be able to talk to people and have that translated directly into your glass pretty much, and be able to understand people that you're talking to. And that was like incredible.
Yeah, that was incredible because that really takes you into like it like instantly makes me a kid where you're like watching these science fiction things, or I mean just the ability, because the example that they gave in that, where you're wearing glasses, is that somebody who may not necessarily be a native English speaker, I think was the example, but they basically have it read out like the transcript in the glasses in real time, and that's like mind blowing to me. Just the fact that one, you've got something that can parse that and just put it in there in real time, because you think about languages, they're so different, right? The way they order words and grammatically set up and stuff. And so yeah, that was really cool. And that kind of because that's kind of how they ended, but they were really ramping up before that with some of the hardware announcements. And I know you're excited about that because I was kind of a little bit blown away by just how much stuff that they really announced. I mean, you knew some stuff was coming, but what were your thoughts on some of the some of the hardware that they announced?
Little disclaimer: I don't have that many Google products, but I am excited by all the things they announced here. Of course, I think the Pixel Watch was probably the most interesting one. I remember I switched from Android to like iOS like 2 years ago. Mostly part of it was, to get that whole like connectivity of the devices. And that was like a huge focus for them throughout the conference.
Yeah.
And I think that was all leading up to announcing, this Apple Watch. And then they also announced that tablet that they're going to be using. So it seems like they're taking like all the stuff that works from Apple and trying to implement that into Android. And I mean, I'm excited. Maybe it'll convert me back to an Android user.
I was actually thinking the same thing because I actually made that switch. So early on, when I first got a smartphone, I got the Evo, the first Evo. It's like way back when. I'm kind of dating myself, like way back when, got the Evo. And I actually switched at that, later on, for a couple of reasons. One, battery life was pretty rough back then, based on Android and kind of how much it sucked up power. But then also, like you mentioned, like having all the different interconnected devices. I mean, that's one of the things in the, iOS, the Apple ecosystem that's so appealing. But it did seem like they spent quite a bit of time just from a hardware perspective, and really throughout, even the developer keynote, talking about multi-device setups, right? Being able to create applications on, obviously for a phone, in both iOS and Android, but then also they got into the wearables, they got into the tablet, they spent some time with Chrome OS talking about that as well. And, with the combination, I think it was they announced the Pixel 6a, the Pixel 7, which is going to be released in the fall, Pixel 7 Pro. Then they announced they had the Pixel Buds Pro, the cooler, earbuds, and then they've got the tablet. Of course, the watch is this fall, but then the tablet next year in 2023. I agree with you. I think they're really trying to make a push into this kind of multi-device, this entire ecosystem of having Google devices, which I think is a pretty awesome. Yeah, I'm actually in the same boat. I was thinking about it. I was like, I don't know. I mean, I prefer writing Android applications, and I just have used typically more Apple products. But now I don't know. I mean, it seems like a pretty cool thing to get into. Anyways, I could spend all day talking about that. But I think, they spent a little bit of time in that main keynote talking about Android, but it was really some of the high level services, applications that they built, like Google Wallet and stuff like that, which are all really cool. But I guess this is a good time to kind of segue into that developer keynote, because that, I think, between you and I, was probably something we're more interested in, especially kind of given our backgrounds in writing applications, obviously, and getting in mobile development. And for that, I thought, they set up the agenda pretty well. There's a little bit more augmented reality. They talk some about Android, Flutter, which I know you're itching to talk about. Chrome, Firebase was a big topic, Google Cloud, and then, more time on machine learning. But, out of that developer keynote, I got to ask you, like, what was your favorite part? I mean, I know it was Flutter and some of the Flutter stuff, but yeah, give me some of your thoughts on that.
So it was definitely Flutter. A lot of the other things, like, so they mentioned Jetpack Compose, like 1.2 beta and all this other stuff. And I mean, it all seems cool, but, unless you're working directly with it, you might not even understand what the implications that are.
Yeah.
Seeing a lot of, like, they showed like examples of, I think using Jetpack Compose or something to preview your devices within the thing. And I'm like, Flutter's been doing that forever almost. I think you guys are just catching up. But the Flutter was definitely my favorite. And I think the big release here was Flutter 3.0, which is like the next, like every time they jump up, the main first number, that's like the big one. The 1.0 was first released in 2018. 2.0 was when they finally added Flutter Web, and now 3.0 is when they have all the platforms lined up and in a stable version of Flutter, which is huge, because like now you can build for 6 devices in a stable manner, right? You can rely on Flutter to provide what you need in order to build applications for like almost anything now.
And they made several improvements, they made like performance improvements, because like on the web, for instance, for Flutter, it's always been kind of a concern that it's not as responsive as like building like a native web application, right? But it seems like they're starting to make performance or like quality improvements as part of that too, which is really cool.
The Flutter releases have gotten a little bit more boring since the beginning, because at the beginning they're releasing crazy new features and now, but the last like 3 or 4, I mean, I personally find them maybe even more interesting, just because there's been a huge focus on performance, like on every part of Flutter. Like even the mobile is still getting big updates, like the Metal for iOS and everything, and fixing those little jank issues. And then now there was some image decoding updates for Flutter Web, which was apparently a big issue. I mean, I'm excited for it. It seems like a lot of the stuff has just been quality of life improvements, and then they added some more dev tools. They got like official integration, official support from Firebase. So documentation's a little bit better, right? Using Firebase is a little bit easier. All of them are just like little quality of life and just like performance, and just making Flutter better to use for bigger and bigger projects.
Yeah, that's interesting too, and I think that it kind of was rooted, because whenever they first started talking about Flutter in the developer keynote, they made mention of the fact that over 500,000 apps now are built with Flutter, which is insane, right? I mean, if you look at the timetable, and when it was first released, that first 1.0, official release, until now, 500,000 applications basically being built off of, that they probably know about, right? I mean, and you think about all the like hobbyists that are out there doing it, all the internal applications that maybe we don't even have, full tracking on. There's just, it's no better time to be a Flutter developer, based on both where it's going. The community obviously is extremely energized and excited about it. And then all these announcements, right, where you're talking about like the quality of life, and being able to, all the more integration into Android Studio, because they talked about with Firebase, they had a whole section on that, of integrating, Firebase capabilities directly within Android Studio, and then you've got the official, full support integration with Flutter, and it just seems like it's really coming together as a full ecosystem. And one of the things that I kind of blew past, but you mentioned Jetpack Compose, is that I haven't had a chance to really dive into Jetpack, and so that's kind of foreign to me. But I know that it's supposed to make just the creation of an app like a little bit more streamlined and simple. But one of the things that they did announce along with the beta was that they've got a beta for Jetpack Compose for Wear OS for the wearables, which I thought was interesting too, because that could have all kinds of implications for how easier it could be to create like a wearable application too. I don't know if you have much experience with wearable. I actually haven't created a watch application, but like everything else in this, maybe I will now. They're making it so easy.
I haven't made anything either, but I mean that was definitely cool to see. And I'm wondering where Flutter is going to come in with variables, because their goal is to be built for anything, like even embedded systems, which they have a little bit of support for, but like it's still that one's still left for not being stable. But yeah, I mean, future's exciting.
Yeah, future is exciting. And actually, that kind of reminded me, because another thing that just popped in my head, and this is why I had to take notes on it, because there was just so many things that were announced, but there was the whole, and they kind of blew past this, but there was the whole, I think it was called like the casual game kit or something like that, where you can build games in Flutter. I don't know how much you know about that, but they kind of blew right past that. But I imagine that that's got to be pretty cool.
From what I understood, that one also was like kind of surprising. I don't think it's anything. I think it's just kind of like a repo with like guidelines on how to build games with Flutter, because you could build games with Flutter previously. There was like the Flame engines and all those things. And from what I understood, I think it was just like a collection of resources, maybe a repository with like some widgets, like easy to use stuff to build games in your application. Unless I could be mistaken, but that's what I took, which was like still very cool, because I've never built a game with Flutter, and this will make it a lot easier to build a game if I want to, which I've been meaning to. Just it was a lot to learn.
Yeah, and I've been meaning for you to write a game too. I mean, that way I can hopefully open source it, and then I can learn a thing or two from kind of how you did that. But yeah, I gotta imagine that's pretty cool. I mean, I always figured that you could probably create games just based on the way Flutter is, how it exists and how you're doing like the drawing and the rendering and stuff like that. It always seems like animation and games and stuff like that fall really well in line, or kind of align really well to Flutter. But it was interesting. I think I took the same, or I got the same impression, which is that it seemed like they were kind of showing off repos or samples. It's almost like this kind of best practices or guidelines for being able to build a game. But it was something that was pretty interesting, because I haven't seen a lot of examples out there of building games with Flutter, but maybe we'll get to see that more.
So Flutter is okay for like the 2D, not too crazy games. You're not going to be able to code CSGO with Flutter just now. But my friend Robert, he's a GDE as well, and he has a YouTube channel too. He built like a little Flappy Bird style game, and like he said it was pretty. He said it was pretty easy to like. I mean, you could watch the video too. It was pretty straightforward, and I mean, it's just a lot of new topics that I haven't gotten around to learning. Which now that they have that resource, hopefully I'll be able to.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, and what you said before, I think it's, no really better time, because it just seems like that quality of life, they're really starting to focus on, not just the initial kind of release of Flutter and, cross-platform, but they're really starting to, tighten up and kind of polish some things, both from the API side, right? Actually being able to write things, and then the different platforms you can kick that out to, but also with the tooling. And so I thought that if there's anything we took, is that they're really starting to kind of come together as an Android ecosystem with all the devices, and then, Flutter with, everything within the tooling and the APIs that you have available to you, and then the release of Flutter 3.0. I thought it was really cool. I mean, in general, I thought I really enjoyed the main keynote, but I really liked the developer keynote, just because they had a lot of really awesome announcements in there. But yeah, with that said, I mean, I think we kind of did a pretty good recap of those first couple of keynotes. I'm interested, once you finish those keynotes, and everybody can get out there and do that now, right? I think they can go to, what's the address? It's like Google,
I just
Google
Google
I/O.
Google I/O. Yeah.
Yeah,
Whatever.
Google I/O / like 2022, and you can get in there. And now I think both of the keynotes are available on demand. So if you don't trust this recap, or you want to see it for yourself, and you want to go spend a couple hours, you can go check that out. But once once they did that today and the live streams were done, then all these other sessions, and we were talking about it a little before, they've got about 150 sessions. There's about over 100 code labs you can get into. There's the whole challenges thing. There's all the different Google communities that are available to you through the platform. I'm anxious to get in and do it, but as it's the first day and we just kind of came out of almost 4 hours of keynote, I haven't really had a chance to kind of get into those sessions, which it's a good thing we've got a recap tomorrow too. But you mentioned earlier that you got a little bit into the Flutter. Is there anything else that you kind of noticed from that session?
That's what I noticed. Like the developer keynote kind of highlighted the main things, and then it dived a little bit deeper. So it was just explaining more of that gaming resource thing.
Oh yeah.
Things like that. And then they gave a couple examples of like, how people are using Flutter. One of them, which was a story from ByteDance, which is the people that created TikTok. Apparently apparently they have a lot of applications that they build. And I think something like, I hope I'm not wrong, but it was either 50 or 500 applications that they've made using Flutter. It's a really wide range, but it's one of those numbers. And either way, it's a lot of Flutter applications from a highly trusted company that, makes a lot of high quality like apps. Like they're a huge company, right?
Yeah.
They're not playing around with the application that they build.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, whether it's 50 or 500, like you said, I mean, that's a lot of applications and it's a lot of apps to trust on a platform, especially one this young. And I mean, obviously the, large community and all these really great updates have really helped, really mature, kind of set the maturity of Flutter. And it's exciting because I think that we're just seeing, I mean, obviously we're just seeing the beginning of it. And I'm anxious to dive into more of those sessions, which I think what we're going to do is hopefully you'll come back tomorrow. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to, kind of divide and conquer and go check out some of these sessions and then be able to provide a recap on some of those. Of course, there's no way we'll be able to cover all 150 of them. So again, I guess you just have to Google I/O and go find the address. But go check out those sessions. And then any last words before we log off for the day and get prepped for tomorrow?
I'm excited to get into the rest of it. And I mean, like I said before, the future is exciting. I can't even imagine what they're going to announce next year and like, all the cool new tech coming up.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, all right. Well, from the both of us, thanks for joining us for this recap. And we'll be back tomorrow to talk about all the individual sessions that we're able to get to and hopefully pique your interest in checking it out yourself. So until tomorrow.